Can you believe that we have reached the last 3 weeks of the regular season are now upon us? It doesn't seem real. It doesn't seem right, but yet here we are. And we'll be talking specifically about the Oklahoma program, a program that at one point was sort of riding high, seemed to have its ticket sort of practically punched for the Final Four. And now, well, it's not impossible, but obviously many more things would have to happen for them to get there. They still have West Virginia, obviously upcoming on the schedule. Following West Virginia, they then have BYU and then TCU. But none of those three are ranked. So a lot, like I said, would have to happen. But they can still make their way possibly to the Big 12 championship game. And once that happens, a lot can happen. Quality wins they have. They have looked very impressive at times. But losing at Bedlam obviously has put a significant crimp into what could have been a very historic season. And by the numbers, as they say, Oklahoma football by the numbers is actually still a very impressive program. They have a lot of things that you look at when you think about top programs. They have a quarterback who until very recently was probably in the top 4 or 5 in Heisman Trophy voting. And is their defense an Iowa defense? Is it a vintage Alabama defense? I mean, I don't think anybody would say that. But it's a respectable college football defense. I mean, whatever term you want to use for that. And they have made plays. You've seen them come along. I think that's sort of the last step, obviously, of this becoming one of the truly premier programs. Is can they get to the point where they have a defense that week in and week out can hold even a quality opponent? Now, I mean, under 30 points, right? That's now modern good defense is holding quality opponents under 30 points. Can you hold good programs under 30 points? Because if you're Oklahoma, you're going to score more than 30 points pretty much every time the good Lord sends your team goes out there onto the field. And I'm going to just walk through some of the things that I've noticed about the team. And really, I believe that this is a program that as they, move into the new phase of their life, right? Their new phase of life, their new location, their new everything, they have a lot of opportunities. And, people have made lots of little jokes about how the last coach left because he's afraid of the SEC and all those kind of things. Well, frankly, out of the frying pan into the fire, because the Pac-12 top to bottom is a much tougher conference than the SEC. And yes, I said it. And yes, I meant it. And I 100% believe that. I think that while there's, still Stanford, but Stanford is good enough to knock off, at least one fairly decent team. Colorado still has a chance at bowl eligibility. Obviously, they had a lot of hype. The hype, to some extent, outweighed what they had in the trenches. But that will be rectified, I think, in future recruiting seasons, recruiting years. And, when you're 7-2 and 4-2, Oklahoma is in a position still to get to a New Year's Six bowl game. And like I said, it's not 100% written in stone that they can't fight their way back even into the discussion for the Final Four. But enough about me yapping about Oklahoma football. You're about to be yapped at by the best. So if you were just holding on, you probably were just sort of holding on saying, oh, how much longer do I have to listen to Bill Carroll? Guess what? Your wait is over. We are joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Nolen J. Lake. And he's going to tell us. Well, I mean, we can't not discuss what the heck happened. We have to spend a little time on what the heck happened. But we won't spend too much time because there's so many other things still to discuss. Going into Bedlam, I know most people who know Oklahoma football probably had a little bit of nervousness, but I think most people had a fair amount of confidence. Am I right?
Well, especially, not looking back at the previous weeks, but going back to a 33-7 loss to South Alabama.
Right.
In our mind and our view of thinking, no matter how much they had improved from that week, there was still no way that they were capable of doing what they've done. except for the fact that they've done this before.
Yes.
And so it's honestly, it's kind of hard to be too confident in those rivalry games. Ask Texas.
Right.
No, in those rivalry games, who knows what's going to happen? And it was the worst of times, and it was the worst of times.
Yes, right. Obviously, everyone knows that this is supposedly a less explosive Oklahoma State offense than some of their previous ones, at least through the air. However, they more than make up with it with what they can do on the ground. I mean, hey, it's not quite Thurman Thomas and Barry Sanders in the same backfield. It's just one guy, and he reminds me more of, like, say, Latavius Murray than either of those all-time greats. But he's really hard. Excuse me, really hard to tackle once he gets up to speed. And I don't have to tell you that. Obviously, everyone knows that now. But the thing I noticed when I watched him, Ollie Gordon is one of those people use terms like deceptive and loping and galloping and whatever. Pick a term. But he's one of those guys who's probably about 6'1.25", but seems taller because he's got a short torso but super long legs.
He looks bigger in person.
Oh, I bet he does. Does.
Yeah. He looks more 6'3" than he does 6'1".
That's what everyone says. And I think it's because of the leg length, right? I think he's
right.
Probably has like a 35.5-inch inseam or something crazy. He's built like a hurdle.
Right.
I'm assuming he probably has a little bit of track in his background. But what I notice is people take bad angles on him a lot, Nolen. I've noticed that people take the wrong angle. I think people still are trying to figure out how he's getting around the corner or to the edge as quickly as he does. You got to see him up close, and as you said, maybe he's bigger and faster in person than he is on tape. But tell me what you noticed when you watched Ollie Gordon.
Well, so one of the things I noticed was he is one of those backs that's going to need a lot of carries. Mm-hmm. He doesn't get tired. He's more of a throwback running back.
Yep.
In the sense that you can't have him in a committee. You can't have him be rotating in and out. He needs to be getting those carries. And in the first half, at one point, he was averaging a little under 3 yards a carry. And the people there in my area were just like, we can't believe we're in the first half, we're holding to this. And I said, he's done this every game. I said, there's nothing going on that hasn't gone on in every one of his games. He starts slow. Now I'm not going to compare him to this back as far as ability. It reminds me of watching Adrian Peterson at OU.
Okay.
Adrian Peterson, if you watch the total film and not just the highlights, you'll see a lot of 0 and 1 yard carries.
0, 2 yards, 3 yards, 2 yards, 0. You mentioned he's not a committee back. First of all, there's times that it makes sense to have a committee. If you've got Marcus Allen, don't put him in a committee. What's wrong with people, right? Don't do that, right?
Right.
Sometimes this guy is the guy. Even nowadays, I know it's not in vogue anymore, but sometimes the guy is the guy. You
Absolutely.
don't have another guy that's nowhere. If the guy tells you he needs to take a rest, which the guy seems never to do, but if he does this, take him out. Anything short of that, if he's not on the ground writhing in pain or doing this, leave him in.
I believe he started I believe he started limping somewhere in the middle of the second quarter. And you never saw this. They took him out a couple of times, but I don't know if he was trying to Jim Brown us, and and it wasn't really as hurt as he was led on to believe, or he was just that tough to push through. Might have been a little bit of both.
Probably a little bit of both, yeah.
Yeah, but it's and I've got to say, man, I think it was the end of September last time I was on, and so much has happened.
Yes,
because we were putting the nails into the coffin of Mike Gundy. The last time I was here, he was done at college football. I tell you, I wish Brock was here, because it's like, Brock, everything that we talked about, just throw it away. Just throw it out, because we were signing Clemson's and Oklahoma State's death certificates last time I was here, and so and again, shout out to Mike Gundy.
Whew.
who says, you know what, if I need to give this guy the ball 30 times, that's what we're going to do.
And thank you
You
for
know,
realizing that. Sometimes a guy is the best player on your team. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes a guy is just better than everyone else. It's okay to just let that guy carry your team. It may not
right,
it may not look great. It may not be the most, it may not be the thing that people do nowadays. It may not, satisfy the requirements of keeping everyone happy. I didn't get my touches. No, because he's better than you. It's okay to tell kids that. In the old days,
right,
whoever was backing up Marcus Allen was told, I'm sure on multiple occasions, the reason Marcus is going to get the ball maybe 37 times today is because he's Marcus Allen. If
right,
you become Marcus Allen, you'll get the ball 37 times.
right, right. I mean, I mean, it makes me wonder what took them so many games to figure out they had Ollie Gordon at the same
that
point.
they had
You know,
Marcus Allen or whatever. Yeah.
right. I mean, it's. I mean, it's the same time I'm giving him credit. I'm like, man, if you're rolling this game plan out week one, um, you know, you may be looking at a totally different reason to play right now.
Yup.
And so, there's that. But no, Gordon is just he is so strong, and
Yep.
he's one of those backs that gets stronger as the game goes along. And um, if your guys are getting tired and getting worn down, um, man, he feasts on that. And he hits the corner, and I'm like, how is he getting there? I don't see some kind of game speed that I'm like, oh my goodness, there's nothing that you're going to be wowed at except the guy just continually gets stronger and stronger as the game goes along.
That's the first thing I noticed is that he didn't seem, and this is why I think people keep taking the wrong angle, right? You don't think he's going that fast. Everyone thinks, oh yeah, this guy's, I don't know, mid 4.5s probably, and he might actually run mid 4.5s. That's the crazy thing. But
Right.
somehow everyone's calculating. I played safety. I know what you're doing. You're doing the math. Like, okay, if I go here, I'll cut him off. Nope. I'm diving at his heels consistently. Faster
Right.
people take the wrong angles
Right.
and are diving at his heels. God forbid he learns to become a really good receiver of the ball, and then it's over. If he learns to really catch a football, it's done. Yeah, I was
And
incredibly
let's
impressed.
cue to the other side of that real quick.
Yes, sir.
On the other side of that, um, Gavin Sawchunk at halftime had 11 carries for 110 yards, somewhere around in
Right.
there,
He was killing them.
and touched the ball twice. Touched the ball twice in the second half. All of a sudden now we're going to go back to Tawi Walker, who hasn't played that. He didn't play the first half at all. Was not in the
Right.
game at all.
Right.
And all the criticism that's going on about the Oklahoma offense, the one guy that seems to be escaping it is DeMarco Murray, and I'm trying to figure out why.
Huh. Is it
Um,
because he's a beloved legend?
Jeff Levy was the Sooner too. The problem was he was injured while he was here, and
Right.
and he didn't. But people assume that guys that play the position can coach the position,
Huh. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's just not so. I'm not saying you can't. All I'm saying is I've never seen a rotation that is different every single week. Every single week. And we're not talking about a different rotation, just players playing a different amount of carries. We're seeing from one week to the next, guys aren't playing. There's guys been played one game, skip the next, play the next game, skip the next. I've never seen that before. I'm awfully confused every time. Levy and Brent Venables are very quick to say, that's the position coach's decision who's on the field. Well, somebody needs to be asking the position coach, why is this happening? How is this guy good enough to play this week but not the next week? And then there was even the Tawi Walker one game suspension that happened against, I think, Central Florida pregame. Some kind of dispute he had with DeMarco Murray, ends up getting him suspended for a game. I'm just curious what's going on in that room. What is leading to these decisions being made?
Do you think maybe Mr. Walker asked some of the same questions that you're asking?
I honestly, I would assume so.
Maybe not quite as diplomatically, but I wonder if
Yeah,
maybe that's what it was.
he might have Keyshawned him, and he and something happened. All of a sudden, I'm looking for him out on the field somewhere, and he's not anywhere. And
Right, right,
then come to find out, it's like somewhere just previous to the game, he's not, all of a sudden he's not playing, and it's a some kind of team suspension. Um,
right.
just led me to believe, and then they automatically said he'll be playing the next week, so I knew it wasn't academic. Um,
Right.
Something going on there, but I would say kudos. I would say kudos to Oklahoma State. They outcoached in every facet of the game. Bowman is one of those good college quarterbacks. Good enough to get you a win. Um, People were talking about how great he looked. I'm like, well, if you kind of look at the total body of his work, it's a lot of inconsistencies. It's nothing that really jumps off the page at you when it comes to Bowman. But that day, he did exactly what he needed to do.
Right, right. Well, I remember him, I guess, in 3 different places at this point in his career. And there were a lot of people predicting he was going to come to life under Harbaugh. Remember that? Like, you're going to really see, what he can do. He's going to have a better offensive line, more structure,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. Well, he couldn't get on the field. So that was the main issue there.
Right.
He was looking like he was rounding into form at one point in Lubbock, and then he kept getting hurt. He got hurt, missed all of, I think, one season. And then the next season, almost, it seems like pretty quickly out of the box, had a bunch of nagging injuries. And they eventually shut him down, I think, if memory serves correctly. Plus, he outplayed.
He punctured he got punctured a lung twice.
That's right. How often do you hear that?
How does I was like, what kind of luck is that? That's just an odd entry to have, and it happens to you twice. But I mean, again, kudos to him. He's out there playing football right now.
Yes, yes. So that's the one thing. Like, people will wonder, like, well, does the kid have a glass lung? But the Bowman, the showman, as they used to call him, right, is capable. Yeah. That's what I noticed about him, even early in his career at Lubbock, is capable of getting crazy hot. He's one of those guys that streaky, pick a term, right? That 3-point shooter who just absolutely can't miss for sort of like a quarter and a half of a basketball game, and then goes ice cold and can't hit anything. And he's that guy. He's that guy who's like 7 of 9 and then 0 for 11.
Right. And you notice his season play as it went along. It improves as Ollie Gordon becomes a bigger part of the offense. He's not going to come out and out talent you at the quarterback, but if you give him the option of play action, you give him the option of having an Ollie Gordon in the backfield for the safeties to keep their eyes on, to keep peeking in the backfield. He's good enough. He's going to pick you apart.
Yeah, and that might be the secret to making a lot of quarterbacks better, is to have a running back that, as the game goes along, becomes more and more difficult to handle and is better on his 32nd carry than he was on his second carry. And as you pointed out, go ahead.
I was say, and you just don't. I believe those guys are still out there.
Yes.
I just don't believe they get the same opportunity.
Oh, preach! I think about, even Earl Campbell, he would have such a different career now. So much of the damage a guy like Earl Campbell did to you was halfway through the third quarter, your shoulder's killing you, your neck hurts, you're tired of tackling Earl Campbell. Oh, crap, here he comes again. And you're saying to yourself, I'm on scholarship. I'm not getting paid. I'm probably not going to play at the next level. I'm probably going to be a podiatrist like my dad wanted. Right? This tackling Earl Campbell thing might not be for me.
No, and so many of those guys are like that. Again, they have to have those carries. They have to have successively ran plays. Sometimes you got to give them the ball on first and second down, and sometimes third down.
Right.
You get to get them going. You've got to get them going. I remember when Adrian Peterson his freshman year, they're trying to still throw bones to Kewan Jones, and Kewan was still the starter like 3 weeks into the season, and they were bringing in AD towards the end of the game to kind of finish the games off. And you're like, you saw some nice things, but you didn't see Adrian Peterson. You saw a glimpse of him, but once they kind of was like, okay, we're gonna we're going to stop doing this and go ahead and let this man do his thing. Then all of a sudden, then you saw the Adrian Peterson,
Right.
the guy could take over a game. But I just believe that so many of these coordinators are so in bed with their systems that they don't see what's in front of them,
Mm.
and I think that can happen to everybody. I mean, I believe Lincoln Riley does that. I believe that
Yep. Yep.
I mean, it's very easy for those guys to fall into that trap. And I remember when Levy was named offensive coordinator, I immediately went to this UCF and his Ole Miss stats to see what's he going to do with the running game. Because I knew a little bit, but kind of like what's the overall workload look like, and what you saw was the top back got around 12, 13 carries.
Yep.
Uh, Another back got about 7 or 8, and typically his quarterback was getting 6 or 7, and that was the running game. And
Yep.
here we are in 2023, and that's still pretty much that's the scheme of the running game. And and finally, of course, last week against Kansas 2 weeks ago, um, he did let Tommy Walker get the bulk of those carries, but then he kind of, I don't know what happened. He again, he's a guy who falls in love with his own system, I think, and he kind of coached himself out of some key plays.
And let's spend a little time on Kansas. So I don't want to make it clear I mean this respectfully as possible. I think I called Jason Bean at one point best value Robert Griffin III. And I mean, all the way down to the darn near world class speed and sort of a slender build and passing mechanics that are not quite what you would teach your kid.
Right.
But boy, when that guy gets in the open field, oh my, oh my. I'm just saying, if I'm a team that doesn't have much speed, like let's just say the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you don't know what this guy is, right? But you've done
Right.
this before with the Steelers. Nobody quite knew what Hines Ward was. Hines Ward passed for 455 yards in a bowl game. People think I'm crazy when it's true though. Look it up. People
Right,
think I'm crazy when I tell them this. Like Hines Ward, his sophomore year, went into a bowl game and passed for 455 yards. And people
Yep.
think I'm kidding. But no, look it up. He played running back one year. He played like Hines Ward probably could have played safety at a high level. So, but the Steelers said he's a football player. He's a Steeler. He feels like a Steeler. And guess what? He was so Steeler. You couldn't be more Steeler than Hines Ward. Antoine Randall, terrific basketball player, pretty darn good baseball player. And of course, obviously, was one of the great football players in Thornton Fractional, I think TF. Either Thornridge or Thornton. I always get those two mixed up. My friends in the south suburbs of Illinois will certainly correct me, but was a terrific all-around athlete. I was no longer with Illinois at the time, but I had been there, and I was like, get him. If he wants to play quarterback, let him play quarterback. And kind of lie to him, because that's what you do anyway, to recruits. Yeah, you can compete at quarterback. Goes to Indiana where they actually told him you can play quarterback. And guess what he did? He wasn't half bad at it. And even played a little bit of basketball, though it was clear he was high school good when it came to basketball as opposed to Indiana good. But take me through the things that you felt like were the keys to victory / defeat in the Kansas game also.
Well, I mean, first of all, again, Leopold at Kansas is just
pound for pound. Is there a better coach in America?
I don't know how there could be. I really don't. When you look at the pure number of scholarship players he had when he arrived, I want to say it was somewhere down in the 40s.
It was. I think the number was 44 or something. Like
yeah,
that.
yeah. And I'm not saying it's Bill Snyder-esque because it's not that many years of being horrible.
Right.
But it's a pretty good amount of time of being horrible.
And
some other coaches, Les Miles, Charlie Weiss, some other guys came in, Turner Gill, and weren't able to do it.
Right.
And so, what I saw from Kansas is, and I see it from Oklahoma State, saw it from UCF. A patient offense can work against a Venables defense. When an offense is willing to pick up 5 to 6 yards at a time, take the shorter routes, do the little things, and not turn the ball over.
There's the big one. Yep. Yep.
Uh, they tend to have success because if you look at every game, you're going to see a lot of yards given up by the Oklahoma defense. Even, you know, Texas was over 500 yards. Um, it's not uncommon for teams to move the ball up down the field. It's whenever they try to do too much, and they suffer for it. Or you get down the goal line situation, you get in that 10 yards in position where the defense, everything kind of crams together, and the defense is able to cause more confusion. But I saw a lot of patience. You know, people talk about being the backup. He's played more than the starter has. I mean,
Correct.
he's. I don't know. I think you'd almost have to call them co-quarterbacks, if anything, at this point.
There you go.
I think it's time to stop calling him Daniel's backup because between the last 2 seasons, he has played a lot of football, a lot. Uh, Very calm in the pocket. Very, again, he completes enough passes to help, but his athletic ability alone, the ability to get out of the pocket, to run, to be patient, look at guys down the field. I had said early on that the Oklahoma defense was going to pay once they played against a quarterback who can make a play, because we saw guys in the first few games, quarterbacks hitting, wide receivers running open and either just missing them or drop passes or something of that nature. And so, you're going 3 and out when the guy on third down drops the pass and he's wide open. Well, good for you, but at one of these games, that guy's going to catch that pass. And so you saw those guys making plays. You saw the big receiver from Oklahoma State come in, make the plays when they needed to, Johnson. Every week there's been a guy that's made plays when they've had to in all these games that they've struggled. And so that's really the difference you see between the wins and the losses, is guys making plays that are there versus guys having plays open to them and not making it. Last year the collapse happened after 3 games.
Mm.
From last year they came out, they beat a pretty stout Kent State team. They beat Nebraska, beat them like a drum. And not saying Nebraska's supposed to be good, but a 49-14 win at Nebraska is a good win. And
Right.
then all of a sudden, after 3 weeks, we saw this collapse happen last year with this team. Well, we got 3 games in, got to the 4th game, the collapse didn't happen. And then we got to the 5th game, and the collapse didn't happen. And then we got to the 6th game, and you start kind of seeing there's something about to happen. And then game 7 and 8, game 7, 8, and 9, you just start seeing performance just go. Guys not paying attention. Bill, this is one thing I've seen a lot the last few weeks. I don't know I've ever seen a whole lot of wide receivers not knowing where they're lined up.
Yes, right.
You see that every great once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
There's been an Oklahoma receiver do that every week for the last 3 weeks. That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, how do you not know where you're lined up? How do you not know where you're at? Anyway, I'm speaking off my personal anger right now.
No, I get that. But while you're in that, this actually helps me. People don't always know who to blame and when to blame the right person, things like that. Now, I'm convinced, especially the play calling nowadays works in such a way that sort of packaged in with the play, very often it tells you where to be, right? When you see, the peanut butter jar and the dragster and, Polly Pocket or whatever, it somewhere in there, in that concept that in your head should go off, oh, I'm off the line, or, I need to be on the line. But I also know that in the heat of battle, we've all been there, right? At some point you're like, wait, hold on. And somebody has to be the guy that says, no, idiot, take one more step.
Yes.
And that's what, right? So I'm going to ask you, who is the guy that you think should be the guy that says, no, idiot, take one more step?
And I was thinking about this very thing. I was looking at the great Bob Stoops teams from the past, and who was the outspoken guy from each team? Who was the guy that, if it wasn't the quarterback position, who was it? It was someone else on the field. It wasn't even, it was a coach. It was typically a quarterback. Um,
Mm-hmm.
don't think because Sam Bradford was not loud in the media that he was quiet to his football team. Uh, he provided that kind of leadership. Landry Jones, with all his issues, except for he had that kind of leadership. And when I look at this team, I don't see anybody wanting to be that guy. Um, and they're rotating these players in and out so much. And then, honestly, I would like to see at this point it should be Austin Stogner should be one of those guys, and it's not.
Hmm. Hmm.
He's a liability. He's a liability when he's on the field. Um, you see him on the bless his heart when he tries to block. He's a half step late.
Hmm.
Um, I can't tell you how many plays were blown up just because he wasn't where he was supposed to be. Um, a guy I'd like to see do it would be Jalil Farouk,
Oh,
but
okay.
he's one of the
Yeah.
guys who did it. He's one of the
Right.
guys who did it.
So maybe it shouldn't be him if he's the guy doing it.
I mean, I'm truly and truly when you look at that team, and I hate to say it because of his name, but it's Drake Stoops. Drake Stoops
Oh,
is
right. Right. Of course,
Drake
it's got to
Stoops
be Drake Stoops, right?
is is the guy to do that, and I feel like he shows in his work ethic. Like he's not one of those guys who does that. He's not one of those guys. You don't see penalties called on Drake Stoops. You just don't. He
Right.
he
Sure.
he
Yeah.
plays the game hard and well. Um, I just I don't know. Again, I think Emmett Jones is one of the best wide receivers coaches in the country. So
Yep.
I'm not trying to be critical of him in this instance at all. But um, somewhere along that way, that that team is really lacking some really strong on the field leadership.
Hmm.
Um, I think part of that too is just also the confusion in the backfield kind of leads to that also with who's playing when. What running back are you going to listen to if he's not even playing that week? I mean, who who do you go to? Who's going to be the guy there that when you come off the field, it's going to be like, hey, this is what we saw here or there, or do this or try that. Who are you going to? Because you know, Javante Barnes just all of a sudden showed up. You know, we were convinced he was hurt all season. All of a sudden, there he is. You know, taking crucial snaps, and we're like, why is he even in there at this point? Um, hasn't played all season. Hasn't played since like the first part of the season. Next thing you know, it's a key fourth down play, and that's the play he goes in on. It's that kind of stuff right there, Bill. That's just, I mean, just definitely some head scratching going on.
And that leads me now to perfectly my next question. Everyone in the world has taken shots at Jeff Lebby, right? I mean, poor Jeff Lebby. He must, if truly you could hear when you're being discussed, he must not sleep at night. He seems to be like everybody. He's going to be blamed for the Kennedy assassination soon. Like everything seems to somehow fall on Jeff Lebby. Jeff Lebby was in the car with Tupac. The so so but it can't all be Jeff Lebby, right? He can't be like the great downfall. There's got to be other people involved in this. You mentioned on-field leadership. Who are some of the other people? And of course, as you said, they have a great wide receiver coach. You have the head coach was one of the great defensive coordinators of the past 20 years in college football, but we've seen breakdowns on defense and then just little imprecision problems on offense. You've got talent on offense. Your scheme is difficult to stop. Despite all of the sometimes fair and sometimes very much unfair criticisms of Jeff Lebby, his scheme works. It puts up points. It's put up points every place he's ever been. And once again, since I mentioned Kennedy, as John F. Kennedy once said, success has 1,000 fathers, but failure is a bastard. Um, help me to find a father for this failure.
It's I try to take it. When I see everybody jumping on a coach, I try to tend to step back and say, okay, nothing is that obvious. Nothing is so obvious. If I tend to shy away from what the fan base is seeing because, a lot of times it's just they're quick to whoever the first person it is they can think of to fault. You know, um, a, a portion of the fan base was already saying, "Well, we might as well just yank Gabriel and put Jackson Arnold in now, and just start working on the SE for SEC next year." It's a crazy fan base. Now, I'll say this: Venables didn't do him any levy any favors by his Rolodex comment this week.
No.
It kind of took me a little off guard. I'm not sure, if you heard it or your audience heard this, but he was Venables was asked in his press conference about the fourth down play. It's 4th and 5. We throw a 3-yard route to Drake Stoops, and so of course tackled, game over. Um, so Venables is asked about the play call, and Venables says, I don't know. Basically, I don't know why we ran that play. We've got a whole Rolodex of better plays to run than that one. And so I don't think he did any favors to Jeff Lebby in that instance because the fingers are already pointed at him.
Yes.
And so maybe internally that those same fingers are still pointing at him. My biggest issue that I'm seeing with Lebby so far is just sometimes his lack of feel for the game, of what's going on, the situations he's in, what's working, what's not working. I think it was against Kansas where he continually tried to run jet sweeps with Gavin Freeman on 3rd and short, different situations, and none of them worked. And it's one of those things like, okay, hey, buddy, let's put that one away for a while. Let's do something else. But there's so little continuity between him. I believe him and Emmett Jones and DeMarco Murray together. I feel like they're not a very good glued group together, if that makes sense. That it's like 3 different guys are thinking about 3 different things, and so you'd like for your position coaches and your coordinator to be in a well-oiled like group where each one knows what the other one's thinking. Each one knows like, okay, he wants to do this. The best guys I can put out there for this player are these guys right here. And we're seeing Jalil Farouk line up in the backfield at times. We're sharing him and with the running backs and wide receivers. It's almost like no one wants to step up and say, "Hey, this is what we're going to do. Let's go do it." I don't know if they still do it this way. This is the way that when Bob Stoops was head coach at Oklahoma, this is the way the offensive play calling was done. No matter who it was, Lincoln Riley, Chuck Long, Mark Magino, Mike Leach. This is the way it was done. This was
Kevin Sumlin, I think, for a little while even.
Yeah, anybody that OC'd for him, this is how play calling went. And this is straight from a friend of mine that played on the offensive backfield for them. He said each coach was on the headset. He said your passing game coordinator would have a play, and your running game coordinator would have a play, and the offensive coordinator would choose what play he was going to run. Bob Stoops was on the headset, listening in on every offensive play call, and he would veto the call if he didn't like it and have his own play call. Again, a defensive coach, but he schooled himself in offense enough that he knew what he wanted to do when they had the football. And so he was actively involved in every play call. In Lincoln Riley's first season, we had a couple of decent running backs named Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine.
Heard of them.
Couple good backs to have in a college football team. You know what I mean? Like they shared the backfield in Cincinnati. They also did in Norman, and we played Texas. Chuck, I think this is Charlie Strong's last season, and we lose somewhere around 16-13, something like that. And the stat line that game was Samaje had 4 carries and Joe Mixon had 3.
Oof.
Let me tell you that from there on out, there was no game where either one of those guys was under 10 carries. I mean, they were both. Sometimes it was one or the other one getting the 20 and the other one getting the 15, but Bob Stoops had his hand in there and said, "Okay, Lincoln, I know what you come in here with." I credit a lot of Lincoln Riley's offense now to Bob Stoops because Lincoln was running that very Cliff Kingsbury, Mike Leach offense. Throw the ball 60 times, run the ball when you had to. That was his MO. And Bob kind of put his foot down and said, "No, we've got to be able to run the football. We've got guys here who can run the football. That's what we're going to do." And he kept that going with Rodney Anderson. He kept that going with guys who came after that. I think Lincoln Riley ran the football a lot more here than what he wanted to.
Huh.
But it's what he had. It's what he had. And even when he became head coach, he had the guys out there. It made no sense to not run those guys. You see what's going on at SC right now. He's back to, his leading backs getting 8, 9 carries. And they've lost 3 in a row.
Yep.
But anyway, I digress from that. I think that Brent Venables is going to have to be more hands-on his offensive side of the football. And that's where this all goes back to me. It's not Jeff Levy, not Emmett Jones, not DeMarco Murray, not Bill Bednall. It all goes back to Brent Venables, and he is going to have to give his defense to Ted Roof or become less involved in defense and get his hands involved in the offense. I don't think Oklahoma can play winning football consistently without a head coach who's not actively involved in the offense.
And it's funny you should mention that because, as I said before, I mean, the numbers are still really good. You're averaging almost 40 points a game, 39.89. You're only giving up 19.78. So basically, you're scoring 40 and giving up 20. That's always good, but especially nowadays, the way football is played, if you're giving up under 20 points, you're doing something right. So
Absolutely.
There's good numbers almost all across the yard when it comes to you're running for 4.3, you're only giving up 3.7 per rush. You've got 22 rushing touchdowns this year and only given up 9. And obviously, you've been lighting it up in the passing game. And we're going to get to Dillon Gabriel. And I'll be honest, Dillon Gabriel to some extent exceeded my expectations. And some of that I think is just physical. I think he's faster and stronger than he used to be. I remember thinking about, I called Dillon Gabriel at one point a more athletic Kellen Moore, right? And he's greatly exceeded. He's greatly exceeded that. He's maybe not quite as athletic as maybe even, obviously he can't be compared to guys like Kyler or Jalen, but maybe he's now closer to a guy like Baker in terms of his athletic ability, which he wasn't before.
That's good. Right.
He wasn't before. He was, I saw him pick up yards at UCF, but it was sort of like, oh, wait, he's running, more not so much him being a terrific runner. He's a willing runner even before, but like his quickness and strength seems to have improved. And he's even has a little more zip on the ball than I remember him having in his UCF days. And I think I've heard that he's put on something like 11 or 12 pounds of muscle since last season. So, but he always seemed kind of a quiet leader, which isn't always a bad thing. But it seems that maybe sometimes it would have been best if he'd been maybe a little more willing to Tom Brady it up, MF somebody a little sometimes. But walk me through it. I've watched a lot of them, but I'm sure you've watched more.
First of all, everything you said was spot on. Physically and shout out to Coach Schmidt. You're not going to come to Oklahoma and play football with that man of strength and conditioning coach and not put on 10, 15 pounds of muscle. I don't care what position you play. The man's a maniac. And so you're going to, man, I tell you, Bill, just talking with my friends who have gone through his strength and conditioning program, I'm like, thank God you are all still alive. That man is violent when it comes to weights and strength and conditioning. And, I'm not a big fan of Benny Wiley, but I can tell you there's a big difference between the Benny Wiley team and the Jerry Schmidt team, physically speaking. And I'll chase that rabbit for just a minute. USC can fire Alex Grinch and hire the next guy, and fire him in 2 or 3 seasons. But until there's a strength and conditioning coach change, you're going to still see the same stuff that
Yes, sir.
I mean, Lincoln Riley has had 3 defensive coordinators now as a head coach. He had Mike Stoops, he had Ruffin McNeil, and he had Alex Grinch, and all 3 defenses looked exactly the same, exactly
Yep.
the same.
Yep.
And so, you know, it is what it is. If you want your defense to be tough, you need a strength and conditioning coach that's going to make them tough. Back to Dylan Gabriel. Um, I thought that Kellen Moore comparison, was is really good. Maybe slightly a little bit more athletic.
Yep.
Um, there's still there's a tremendous lack of trust in Dylan Gabriel throwing the football. I believe from Jeff Lebby,
Huh.
and I think that was showcased in the Kansas game. We didn't, he throws a pick six, first, second pass of the game, and then basically we didn't throw the football again until fourth quarter. I want to say I don't know how many throws he ended up with, but I want to say at halftime he was in the 7 to 8 range as far as
Wow.
passes thrown. Yeah, immediately
Unless
he
you're
threw
the
pick
Air
six.
Force Academy, that's kind of a low number.
Oh, my son was losing his mind. I said, "Son, this is the way I grew up. My quarterback never threw the football."
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, if we threw the football, we was in trouble. Something bad
Yep.
was happening, and
Yep.
so
True.
he immediately, the weather was windy, the weather was bad, but Beans over there throwing his 20 passes, and we at the same point we had 7, 8, or 9 passes thrown, and I feel like there's a lack of trust there. Um, I You know what the NFL routes are when I say this. I don't trust Dylan Gabriel throwing the NFL routes.
You don't want him throwing bang eights. You don't want him throwing, deep overs. You don't like that. You don't like the
No,
idea of him throwing a deep out.
no, no.
Okay. Okay.
Um, you know, and I think there's a reason why we don't see any of those. Which honestly it stinks because it would be nice to be able to run some of that stuff. We basically have 2 pass plays here. We're gonna throw a 3-yard out, or we're gonna throw a 30-yard vertical. That's pretty much our choices right now when it comes to a passing offense. Um, some of the play design because of that makes no sense. Um, there's several plays against Kansas I took screenshots from where we had 3 wide receivers standing within 6 feet of one defensive back. Um, and as a basketball coach too, you know, floor spacing is huge.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to ever be somewhere where one guy can guard 2 people. You don't
Right.
you don't want to give those numbers up. And I mean, it was play after play. I'm looking at it and I'm like, no wonder we can't complete the ball 8 yards down the field because we've got 3 guys brother-in-law on each other. We can't. They're all just so close to each other that I mean, any one of their defenders can make a play on it. And so I think because of the lack of trust in Dylan Gabriel and some of the stuff that we're running and throwing, um, we're not letting our playmakers go be playmakers. We've got 6'5" Jaden Gibson, you got 6'4" Nick Anderson,
Oof. Yeah.
Jalil Farouk 6'1", 6'2". Um, there's guys out there that can make plays. It's just we're not doing the things that are their strength. We're having to do what Dylan Gabriel can do. Which again, he is a fine college quarterback. I mean,
Yes.
he is a fine, I would dare say a good college football quarterback, and that's
Mm-hmm.
it. That's what he is. Um, you know, his when he throws the ball to the left, the ball sails. If he throws the ball back to the right, he's a little bit more accurate. When he throws it back over his shoulder, he's a little bit more accurate. Opens up way too much. Um, that's not as bad as it was last year. The
Mm.
ball sailing on him because he's opening up too much. Um, he's and people will forget this. In the 2000 championship year, Josh Heupel ran a number of plays and made a number of plays with his feet. Um,
Right.
I remember
And he
fourth
probably
and
ran
short
about
against
four
Kent State.
nine. But yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I honestly, but there was a big difference between Josh Heupel's junior year and senior year. He couldn't do that his junior year. His senior year,
Yep.
all of a sudden, when they need him to make a play, he could do that. I feel like Dylan Gabriel's somewhere between Baker Mayfield and Josh Heupel when it comes to that
Mm.
athletic, that athletic ability. I feel like Baker maybe a step or two, a little bit faster.
A little bit
But I'll
faster
say
and definitely more willing to put his body in harm's way.
right, but you know the fact. I mean, we're running design running plays with Gabriel this year.
I noticed that. Yeah.
Did not see that last year. It's one thing when your quarterback scrambles. It's another thing where you're running quarterback design draws. Uh,
Yep.
the problem is every time we go to 5 outs, that's what's coming.
And that brings me once again to my next question. It's almost like you're a plant. So you have a game, well, obviously West Virginia, imminently winnable. And a lot of times people say, you're playing for pride. Well, I mean, first of all, pride's kind of important, but I don't think that's true. I think you're still playing for way more than pride, at least in my opinion. You got West Virginia, you've got BYU, you've got TCU. Your new conference mate BYU, which still sounds super weird, but you've got you've got these 3 games left. Tell me about the things that you think will be the deciders in those 3 games, and then what do you think can happen that might keep Oklahoma's hopes alive? Well, one, just to win the Big 12, and then maybe even beyond that.
You know, um, we're very fortunate to have the schedule that we do have. Uh, these next 3 games are very, very winnable. Um, BYU offensively is just not good. Um, TCU is just, you know, losing Riley, Garrett Riley was a huge
Yep.
loss,
Mm-hmm.
and not to mention Heisman runner-up quarterback. Uh, you know, those are big losses. Um, but I think the number one thing I'd like to see happen in these next 3 games is going to tell you where this team is at is seeing those mental mistakes come down more than points given, points scored. Against Kansas, there was a drive where they started on the 2 yard line. And we gave them 45 yards in penalties in that one drive,
Wow. Whew.
um, and one of them on the sideline.
That's right.
One of them a coach's penalty. And then last week, it's not happening and it's not happening. Then all of a sudden, Oklahoma State gets the ball deep in their own. They've got a long ways to go. And next thing you know, here comes a 15-yard penalty. And then Brent Venables gets a 15-yard penalty. So now we're going to give them 30 yards the very next week. Coming off a week where it was a huge reason and the reason why Oklahoma lost that football game to turn around and do it again the very next week against Oklahoma State. We got a field goal on that drive, which lost by 3. Um, Bill, there's a fine line between winning and losing.
Mm.
There's this team, and this team was just a few points short last year of being 10-3. People, even as bad as they played, 3-point loss to West Virginia last year, um, 3-point loss to Florida State. Um, there was a handful of losses there that real easily this team could have won and they didn't. And you this year, and I tell people this all the time: how much better is Oklahoma? They're a little bit better than last year. Not a lot, a little bit. What you're seeing is some of the 3-point games that they lost last year. They're competing for, and they so far, except for the last couple, they've won. Since UCF was the game they would have lost last year. Um, there's they're about 3 to 4 points better than they were last year. Um, and also shout out to John Reese Plumlee, who had a fantastic game.
Mm.
One of my favorite kids. I love him to death. Great kid, great family, great athlete. Man, just wish him the best. But West Virginia, again, it's a very winnable football game. Uh, Last year, penalties, turnovers, and just dumb mistakes killed this football team. If this team is going to lose, I prefer to watch them lose because the other team just straight out outplayed them, not because we were giving them 15-yard penalties on 3rd and 10,
Right.
or Just coaches getting 15-yard penalties, um, wide receivers not lining up right. You know, I don't know what the penalty count was against Oklahoma State. I know the penalty count against Kansas was 11 for 103.
Whew.
Uh, I mean that's and bottom line is, Bill. To me, that comes back to discipline, and it comes back to that coaching staff.
Mm,
You know, if your team is starting to create a habit of that,
right. Right.
yes, it's a guy on the field that's making those mistakes, but you as a coaching staff, your discipline shows up on the football field. It
Right.
shows up and it shows up in the penalties and the penalty yards. That's where it shows up. And so, my hope is that some of the team discipline issues have been covered this week. A lot of injuries the last couple of weeks too, Bill. If I'm going to be fair to Danny Stutzman, who's that's a good football player to not have on your football field.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
uh, but shout out to Kip Lewis, who filled that spot last week. He's going to be an interesting guy, Bill. He's going to be a very interesting prospect, this Kip Lewis. Fantastic athlete, playing the linebacker spot at 6'1", 205 pounds.
Yeah, that's happening nowadays, more and more.
He kind of reminds me a little bit of Nick Harris from back in the day. He's that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
he can be your physical safety or whatever. But I mean he's sideline to sideline. He was really good last week. We've got, trying to think, Peyton Bowen was in a boot. There was enough injuries there that you missed guys that were key that you really wish you'd have had on the field. Not saying that those games would be won, but you really need those guys on the field. We need. I know we're way into the season now. Man, I'd love to see some kind of consistency from the running back position. I mean, something. You know, Honestly, Bill, we're sitting here this week, and I can't tell you who's playing next week. Who's playing against West Virginia?
Oh boy.
I mean, I can't tell you. I can't tell you who's going to be getting the bulk of the carries. I can't tell you who's going to even see the field and who isn't. Not much less get who's going to get the bulk of the carries.
Oh.
We're this far into the season, and nobody knows. Um,
So that seems less than ideal.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, that's it's one of the most confusing things I've ever seen. I've never seen that from a running back position where from one week to the next you don't know who's doing what. Um,
Huh.
I'd like to see some kind of just like, this is what we're doing, this is who we're going with. Let's get some, hey, this is no questions asked. This is what we're going to do. Establish your identity. Establish who you want to be. You got one of the greatest offensive line coaches of the last 20 years, I think,
Right.
in Bill
Yeah.
Bednoff. You know,
Right.
the guy knows what he's doing. I think there's some guys up there that can do their job. It's just let them go do their thing. Let them go get out there and if it's going to be Tommy Walker, let him get 20 carries. Let him hurt a defense. Let him soften somebody up. You know, um, find a way to get the ball in Nick Anderson's hands. Uh, I want to say at one point he had 12 catches and 8 touchdowns. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous amount of. I mean, the guy just makes plays, but you put the ball in his hands, and so find ways to get these guys open downfield and get them the football.
It's funny you just mentioned him, and there's another player I want to talk about in a second, but a guy just got reinstated in the NFL named Martavis Bryant, and I really see a lot of Martavis when I watch that kid.
Oh, absolutely, good. That's a good call. Yeah.
So, yeah, I was going to say, I want to talk a little bit about a player that I've been watching, and he's impressed me. I'm not about to call him J.J. Watt or anything. I'm not insane, but he seemed like one of those guys that next year we'll be talking about. I mean, we should be talking about this year, but we're talking a lot about next year. Tell me about Ethan Downs. I didn't know a lot about him coming into this season, but every time I throw on the tape, it's like he does at least one or two things that make me go, oh, look, he's got a little more speed than I thought. Oh, he's got way more power than I thought. And, oh, hey, look, he's using his hands more. Like it seems to keep getting better the more I watch
it. First of all, the Ethan Downs, a great kid, great family. Mom and dad are great people. I mean, he comes from a throwback family of football. He's got a throwback mindset. He's one of those guys, honestly, that you look at him and say he could have played in any era. He could have played in any era of football and done well because of his attitude and his toughness. One of the things that we're doing on defense that again I'm not used to seeing this from of so much of Venables defense at every position is we're playing a lot of people. We're playing a lot. Um, you're seeing every position getting rotated out a lot, which I'm not quite sure. There's a lot of youth on the team. There's a lot of young players. Maybe we're trying to get everybody playing time. Maybe we're trying to keep everybody happy. I'm not quite sure,
Ah.
but Ethan Downs is one of those guys that should be on the field on every play, every
Mhm.
snap. Has a great inside move. He's strong. He can he's not a run game liability like some of the others. Um, I love his hands. He
Mhm.
knows exactly what to do. Um, truly a program guy. Um, I would probably put him as Drake Stoops, probably the two toughest guys on the football team. Just
Huh.
tough, gritty, just get down and make football plays when they have to. He plays with a lot of passion and intensity. Um, you know, I really can't say enough, but Ethan Downs is a really good football player. I'm glad he's had opportunities this year to finally to show that. Um, Last year wasn't so great. I think a lot of the guys struggled last year just because the Brent Venables system is not easy.
Hmm.
It's not something, you know, Travis Lewis said, after he went to the Detroit Lions, he said, what we're doing in Detroit is not as hard as what we did at Oklahoma. Um, like the Venables vocabulary and knowing what to do and the blitzes and where to be at, it's a lot different. So last year you had a lot of guys who had a pause in their game because they didn't know where to be, or they had to think about what they were going to do. So what you're seeing out of Ethan Downs this year is a guy who's not having to think about what he's supposed to do. He's going and just doing it. Um, his stats numbers would be a lot different if they weren't rotating him in and out so much. Um, but yeah, he's a great one, Bill. And another guy I'm really intrigued with is Billy Bowman.
Oh my God! Are
Um,
you reading my mind?
yeah, yeah. Uh, Bill, we've done this for a long time. I kind of know.
I that was literally the next question I had. That's another guy that sort of snuck up on me. I usually, think of myself as a guy that knows football, and I mean, I was aware he was in the program, but he went last year from being a guy that I was kind of sort of aware of. He would show up every once in a while, made a couple of nice special teams tackles, flashed a little bit in the Kansas State game. Then I kind of lost track of him, to be perfectly honest. I
Yeah,
think he also might have been one of the better players in the Tulane game. I think I might have seen for Oklahoma as well.
yeah,
but like I wasn't thinking, got to put a gold star by this guy. I was just like, yeah, he's. And then this year, it's like, huh, this guy might be a Sunday guy. But yeah, take
yeah.
me. You're crazy how you anticipated that. But yes, tell me about him. I exactly what I want to talk about next.
Well, one of the things that the mistakes made with Billy Bowman initially was um, they really pulled him out of his position. Uh,
Hmm.
Grinch had him as a playing nickelback some.
Right.
Uh, then they tried him at corner for a little bit. Um, and you're seeing right now he's at home. He's at home doing what he should be doing. He's a great athlete. I would say just athletically speaking, there was talk when he first arrived at Oklahoma that he was going to be a two-way player. Um, just an all-around a fantastic athlete. 5'11", plays at about 195. Um, Fast, great awareness, has really good closing speed. Um, Probably one of the better tacklers we've had at the safety position in a while.
Yep. Yep.
You don't see him miss too often. Um, I'm a big fan of his closing speed. I mean, he's able to close the gaps quickly. He reads the defense well. Um, he's one of those guys he's super smart, intelligent, and always seems to be in the right place at the right time. He's one of those guys that um, I think he's going to be one of those Oklahoma defensive players that the next thing he's kind of been quiet through his college career, and the next thing you know, he's got 5 years in the league. I
Right.
mean, he's going to be one of those types of guys that Oklahoma's been pushing out, a la, a Tony Jefferson or
Right.
someone
Yes.
like that.
Right.
And he's pretty comparable to Tony Jefferson. Not so much just strong in the run game, but as far as just he's a better athlete than Tony Jefferson.
Yes.
But as far
Tony
as
Jefferson wishes he could run and jump like that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but just as just tackling wise, Tony was a good tackler.
Hmm. And
Build
super
wise, they're
smart.
kind of
Yeah.
similar. Yes,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
but very very smart, very intelligent, very quick, moves to the ball quickly. Yeah, I think Billy Bowman is definitely going to be one of those guys we're going to watch playing on Sundays.
My last two questions, and I'm going to start with the Big 12 itself. In your final voyage through the Big 12, what do you think ends up happening? Who do you think ends up playing in the Big 12 championship, and how do you think the Big 12 championship plays out?
Well, it's funny you asked that because I was thinking about what if he asked this, because to me there's just a lot of okay teams in this league this year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the Texas win over Alabama was just too overblown. Um, obviously it's a nice win. I'm not trying to say it's not, but the Texas has shown who they are. The loss to Oklahoma, going down to the wire with Houston. Um, they've got athletes just like Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think you know because you've got Texas is involved there. You got Oklahoma State still in that. Kansas still in the conversation. Oklahoma still in the conversation.
Yep.
There's a couple of scenarios where Oklahoma still gets in.
Yep.
Um, that's my Texas friends are hoping that we do because they want a chance to beat Oklahoma. And so, um, and and my problem is I don't know if the Big 12 commissioner wants that to be OU in Texas, and so um, we'll see how that goes down the stretch. But right now, if you were to say who's playing the best football in the Big 12, it's Oklahoma State, and
Got it.
so Oklahoma State and again Gundy getting those guys to overachieve. He heard me talking bad about him on your show last month, and now here I
He
am.
got it together. Yeah.
He
He
beat
got
all my
it.
words, but yeah, I think it's going. I think you're going to be, Texas on one side, on the other side, it could be Oklahoma, it could be Oklahoma State, it could be Kansas, but I'm believing that it's going to be Oklahoma State.
Okay. And my final question is, of course, the SEC is right around the corner. Uh, Everyone talks about being "quote unquote" SEC ready. Well, you said your strength and conditioning program is definitely SEC ready. Uh, in terms of things like recruitment, and I mean, has recruited well forever, right? I mean, since before you and I were even alive, Oklahoma's been recruiting well,
Yeah,
and so I'm not too. I mean, of course, I don't have the emotional attachments, but I'm not worried about Oklahoma recruiting in the SEC. But for you, who does have some emotional attachment, what are the things that you do see that you think, okay, we got to fix this, and what things you think, okay, we're fine as you make the move to the SEC in all areas, operations and coaching and playing and recruiting and everything, the whole shebang bang.
it's funny now because the biggest thing they're doing on campus right now is trying to get tailgate ready for the SEC. And so uh, Oklahoma just had to move their student section uh, to a different place now, and that seems to be locally the big uproar is what they're doing to the students. They have to be moved away from the opposing team's bench. Um, but I'm looking into this class right now, this recruiting class, and you know, I would say at any point, if you're going to play in the SEC, there's two positions you're really going to have to recruit strong at, and that's going to be your offensive line, your defensive line, your tackles on both sides, your
Right.
tackles on offense and your tackles on defense. That to me is the biggest part of being able to compete week in and week out because the now I'm gonna say this isn't the SEC from 5 years ago. You
Mm-hmm.
know, Alabama and LSU just put on what 40 on each other a few weeks ago, last week. Uh, you know, it's a little different. It's not the 10-7 ball games that people want to think that it is. And I was thinking about how my concern was and what kind of drop off we're going to see. And so I went this last week and I did a little statistical analysis of two teams that left the Big 12 and went to the SEC. And so I looked at Texas A&M's body of work. In the Big 12, they won at one time over the course of 16 years, 17 years, however long they were in the league. And their winning percentage was around 535. And so then I went to their SEC body of work and looked, and their winning percentage was at 536. Little to no difference between Texas A&M in the Big 12 and Texas A&M in the SEC. As far as record wise, as far as one Big 12 title so far, no SEC titles, but that's basically you're looking at almost like an apples per apples exchange there when they went from one conference to the next, and you would expect that to be different, especially whenever they made that change, that there would have been some kind of a drop off. So then I went and looked at our friends from Missouri and looked at their conference records, what they've done in the Big 12, and looked at what they're doing in the SEC. Again, you're seeing that the win differential percentage was 0.0156 difference. Basically, Missouri was no drop off from going, and I know that sounds people to say because you would automatically think huge drop off. You would automatically you're going to assume that this is the way that there's going to be some sort of things aren't going to be what they used to be. And so when I look at both of those teams and see that things have stayed basically the same for them, how did those teams stay the same? Well, you're seeing Missouri right now is recruiting, being able to recruit defensive positions they couldn't recruit in the Big 12. They're getting tougher, bigger guys on the line. They're getting some athletes at wide receiver that are pretty phenomenal. Um, Basically, some old school SEC recruiting. And you look at what A&M's doing. Well, A&M's just you know handcuffed by Jimbo Fisher. They're getting all the guys that can play the game. They're getting all the guys that you would think would would push them to the next level, but they're still competing at the same level they were at when in the Big 12. Different coaches, different time periods, same results.
Hmm.
I'm not saying I'm saying what you're seeing out of Oklahoma now, the 10-3, 11-2 type seasons. I'm expecting those to continue. Um, I believe that what we're seeing now um, is basically what you're going to see there. Um, a team that's good enough to win, you know, 9, 10 ball games every year, and every once in a while it's going to win a championship. We're not going to win 5 in a row. Don't get me wrong. We're not winning the SEC 5 seasons in a row, and I'm not saying that. What I'm
Gotcha.
saying is year in year out, they're going to be somewhere in the conversation at least till weeks 8, 9, or 10. They're going to be somewhere in there. But I look at our recruiting class. I like to see what we're getting on the edge. We're getting edge. We're getting pass rushers. We're getting defensive tackles. We're getting offensive linemen. Um, we've got at some point this tight end position is going to have to get cleaned up. We didn't really even get into that. It's got to become a viable something again. Um, but I don't know that we're really that far off from being SEC ready right now.
Okay. So, Mark Andrews, Paul Cacatera, do you have younger brothers, cousins? Please get on the phone. Let us know. Okay. Well, first of all, as always, it is a pleasure. For those who don't know, Nolan and I've known each other for a very long time. We've known each other since our children were very, very small, and his children are enormous. And my daughter is, scrappy, but she's now a college freshman, even though she's not the biggest kid in the world. But so we've known each other since our children were, down here, and now kids of his children are up. At least one of them's up there. So it's great to spend time together. But we will definitely speak at least once more. I guess maybe right before the college football playoffs, we'll maybe come back and talk about that. Tell
Absolutely.
people, Nolen, where they can find your work, where they can follow you, and what you're up to.
So you can follow me on whatever this thing is. I keep saying Twitter. I don't know if that'll get me. I don't know what it is these days. It's weird to call it X. But
It
on
is
X,
so
I'm at.
weird.
I mean, it's like, come on. I keep calling them tweets, and they're not tweets anymore.
Uh,
At NJ Lake, you can find me there. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram. I am a local youth coach. I coach baseball, basketball, and football for local teenagers, kids, underprivileged kids. I have around 100 kids a year in sports programs that play for me in something. Software developer, um, you name it. Like I'm scrounging to find dollar bills and do what I love at the same time.
yes, sir.
Public speaker, travel the country. I speak to sports organizations and groups uh, about things, about what it takes to win. But man, sports is my life, and it's a great one.
I could not agree more, sir. Much of what you said is probably what binds us together. It is an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure to share any platform with you. And I'm slowly but surely trying to pull you back into my clutches to get you to like do more writing and podcasting, whatever, and to be my official man in the, well, I mean, not the Big 12 anymore, but my official man in Oklahoma, wherever
Yeah,
conference.
you can still plug me in the Big 12 because that's
Oh, that's
and
right.
I
Yes.
I'm still right there.
You're
I've
still
got
right.
Oklahoma State ball
Right.
game
You're
every
not
once in a while.
physically moving to Alabama. That's true.
Yeah, yeah,
It doesn't work that way.
yeah.
But it is indeed a pleasure, and we will definitely speak again soon. On behalf of myself and my missing but still listening co-host, I know he'll don't be surprised if he crawls into your DMs with a bunch of questions he didn't get to ask, and coaches he's still trying to fire. But it is always a pleasure. Hey, everyone needs a hobby and a passion. But once again, on behalf of Team MBS Media, I want to thank you. Nolen J. Lake is an amazing follow. If you care even a little bit about football, and especially about that part of the country, which is now SEC country, I guess, or will be. But
Yeah.
he is. It's once again so weird to say, but he is an amazing follow. He's a fantastic man with an amazing story to tell, which I don't know, maybe we'll do a special Nolen's journey, something somewhere. We'll figure it out. That's for another show, another time, another place. But for tonight, we got a chance to dive deep into Oklahoma, which is a storied program and a program that is in sort of an interesting place in both its transitions we talked about, but even just what kind of program it's going to be going forward. A lot is going to be decided, I think, in the next couple of years, and how they're viewed nationally is going to change a little bit. They have a chance to stamp in the national consciousness of one of those programs everyone's going to watch every year, or they could get Texas A&M. So hopefully you'll choose not to have that happen to your program. But once again, I want to thank you again, Nolen. Either way, no matter what happens, I promise we'll be talking again soon. Thank you so much for your attention, for your talent, and for your time. And we will do